Thank you for listening to English with Monty. For bonus episodes, to test your English grammar, book a free 30-minute trial lesson, or to access our conversation group in London, go to linktree/English with Monty, linktr.ee/English with Monty. Today we're talking about common mistakes in English. Hello there and welcome to English with Monty. We're moving on to episode number 58 and I have Gideon. Hello, Gideon.
Hello, John. How are you today?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to this episode.
Me too. You're sounding very sprightly. You obviously got up on the right side of bed.
No, I just had about 6 cups of coffee, so I'm a bit awake, shall we say.
Fair enough. If that's what it takes,
That's
I can understand. Yeah. Sometimes it's 8 coffees, isn't it?
It's something like that, yes.
So today, the idea was, which I think we did a long time ago, I think dating back to episode number 2, which is a long time ago now. It's coming up to 4 years. It's 4 years since English with Monty has been going, and we've done a lot, haven't we?
Covered it all.
I thought we'd revisit this because it's common errors. And those common errors apply mostly to English learners, but some of them maybe also to native speakers. I thought this would be a good topic to revisit.
I think it's a good idea because some of these on your list that I'm looking at right now, they're very common mistakes. I hear them all the time in the classroom. And as you said, some of them are even made by native speakers. So I think last time we did one, which was affect and affect, which are both pronounced as affect, and native speakers, including myself, when I was younger, used to get that a bit mixed up. We cleared that up, listen to that episode, but we've got some more.
We have got some more, because there's plenty of them, really, aren't there?
Yeah.
There's some real false friends out there, aren't there? Let's say that.
Also, there are words which are very similar and false friends, yeah. And also something to do with English chaotic spelling, which causes confusion.
It does cause confusion, doesn't it? That's very true.
Yeah.
I think this is probably a good starting point because I think this covers most of the Latin languages. It certainly covers Italian. I think it probably covers French as well. Sensitive or sensible.
Oh, yeah, that's a very common one. I know that from having lived in Spain and in France. Common mistakes because of the way they get translated. Where are we starting with? Sensitive? You're a sensitive person, John.
What are you saying about me? What?
The cat fell off the tree and John was crying.
Wouldn't you cry if a cat fell off a tree?
But you shouldn't. So the cat's okay. You shouldn't be so sensitive, really.
You sound as if you're heartless. It's when you get upset easily, isn't it? Or potentially get upset easily, or it can be a positive rather than a negative thing, can't it? I mean, if you're sensitive, it means that you're potentially caring and nice and lovely, but it's the context really, isn't it? It could be used to say it's too much as well, couldn't it?
Exactly. Your feelings can change very easily depending on a situation which may not affect somebody else quite so deeply. So if you cry when you're watching a soap opera, watching an episode of, I don't know, what is it, EastEnders, then I say you're a sensitive person, not a sensible person.
Apparently some of the Colombian soap operas are worth crying at. So dramatic.
You know, if you're sensitive, you will. And other people can just have stony hearts and the most horrendous thing can happen and they have no feelings, no emotion at all. Those people are not sensitive.
How would we use sensible?
Well, you can think of like a sensible person or a sensible child maybe does his or her homework and goes to bed early and eats lots of vegetables. And the sensible is like following the correct path, doing things in a normal and logical way, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really, isn't it? It's just making sure you don't take any risks, I suppose, isn't it? If you're sensible when you cross the road, you would look both ways.
Yeah.
So it's making sure you're okay.
Sensible is often with money. This month, I can't afford to buy another Ferrari, so I'll just have to buy a croissant instead.
Bit of a contrast there.
If you're sensible with money means you take care and you don't overspend.
Reducing your 3 Ferrari a month addiction.
Exactly.
I think this one is a really good one, the next one. So beside or besides. Besides as a word is probably not used a huge amount by non-native speakers, is it?
Which one? Besides.
Besides, with the S at the end, yes. So Besides.
And besides, it's a little bit formal, isn't it?
Yes, I guess so.
In addition to,
Hmm.
or if you're giving an extra piece of information. The sea looks really dangerous, so I don't think would be a good idea to go in. And besides, I can't swim.
Hmm.
So you're giving some additional information. I don't think that sandwich looks very appetizing. And besides, I'm gluten intolerant, so I'm not going to try it.
It's kind of additional information as well as that's kind of how we use it, isn't it?
Yeah, you say one thing and then you say besides, and then you give some more information. I think there are other ways to use it, isn't there? Meaning like apart from, well, besides John,
Hmm.
Bob also does a podcast on English grammar.
Yeah, it's true. Bob's is better than mine, though, apparently.
Yeah, there you are. Listen to Bob's English grammar. Yeah.
Indeed.
Two ways to use besides.
And then beside, without the S at the end, is literally next to somebody, isn't it? So I sat beside this very eccentric looking gentleman with a big top hat in the park.
Exactly. Yeah, beside generally means next to, sat beside me.
It always means
Yeah,
next to, doesn't it?
yeah, I
Is
think
there
so.
another
Yeah.
way of using it? That's it, isn't it? I think. Economic and economical.
This is quite advanced, but it is a common mistake. And I do remember I can't remember who it was, a politician who wasn't an English speaker, but English was almost perfect, but she made this mistake. The economic situation, talking about the money in the country, we must improve the economy, the economic situation of our people. Okay, economical means saving money. So I don't have much money to spend this month because I've been spending too much, have been very sensible. So we need to be economical with our spending.
It's budgeting, isn't it? In some ways, if you're being
Yeah,
economical, I guess you're ensuring that you don't spend more than you can afford. Because often we use it with things like fuel consumption, don't we? We could say this
yeah,
car is more economical because it runs on diesel
water.
rather than petrol or water. Yes. Yeah. That
That's
would
really
definitely be more economical.
good. Yeah, exactly. So electric cars are generally more economical than petrol cars.
Hmm.
The amount you spend on an electric car once you've bought it is much less than on a petrol car, so it's more economical.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good example. The next one we're looking at is sight and sight, which are pronounced the same, but they're spelt differently.
People get confused because of the spelling. The spelling
That's it.
mistakes here more than anything.
Because they are the same word fundamentally in terms of the pronunciation, aren't they? But they're used in very different ways. So sight, which is Sight. So you could say that my sight is deteriorating. It's getting worse as I get older. So I need
Yeah,
glasses.
exactly. SIGHT is about your vision, ability to see, and SITE is a place where things happen, a website, of course, a building site.
The place, isn't it? Really, location. Because one of my
Hmm.
students said that the other day about website, and I suppose it's because it's a place on the web, isn't it? Really, that's why
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
spelt that way.
So the place where something happens, a battle site, the
Hmm.
place where the battle happens.
Lend and borrow. I think this is frequently misunderstood, isn't it? I would say we probably need to think about prepositions connected with them quite often, don't we? You usually borrow from and you lend to. So hopefully that gives people a better idea of how you would use them.
Yeah. Also, lend can take direct object and borrow can't. So lend me your hat, John.
Hmm.
You can't say, can I borrow me your hat? No. So lend me. I lent him a toothbrush. I lent her a pair of shoes. You know what I mean? Yes. So you lend to somebody as well. You can use the preposition to, and you borrow from.
I suppose it depends on the context of how you use it as well, isn't it? I was wondering if you could lend me your MP3 player. So in this
Hmm.
case, because you're saying you have to use lend.
Hmm.
And then obviously, if you're using I, it's like, can I borrow your pencil for a minute?
Yeah, exactly. You borrow from, that means that somebody else is giving you an object. And lend to, it's your object you're letting someone else take for a while.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. We've got teach and learn. It's an interesting one, isn't it, with teach and learn? Sometimes these do get confused. I'm a little bit surprised by why they do, but they do, don't they?
Again, it depends what your first language is. Sometimes they're used more or less interchangeably if you translate them. French could be like that. And even in English, rare, but teachers wouldn't say this, but if something happens to you and you deserve it, something bad happens to you, and so you deserve it, I might say, well, that'll learn you.
Oh, yeah, that's true, isn't it?
Kept getting drunk and driving his car, and now he crashed. Well, that'll learn him. Even amongst native speakers, it's sometimes confused, although probably that's sort of dialects talk. You see what I mean? So that's why Cankel's confusing. The expert, the person with the knowledge teaches, and the person who wants the knowledge learns. That's the traditional way, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And as you were saying, it's that'll learn them is a colloquial phrase, isn't it? It's what people say, but I suppose the real phrase is that'll teach them, isn't it? Really. It's a way of saying things, isn't it? But I think that's the best way of looking at it. Like what you said was very clear. Historic and historical.
Yeah, this one's a difficult one.
It is quite tricky, this one, isn't it?
Historic means important, isn't it? I mean, it's an historic moment.
Exactly. Significant event in terms of history, isn't it?
Yeah. The moon landing, that was historic event, an important event history.
Absolutely. If you believe it existed.
And historical isn't about an importance. It's about the fact that something is from the past or existed in the past.
For example, Napoleon was a significant historical character in French history.
Yeah, well, that's a bit confusing because he was historic in the sense that he was important.
But I guess if you're using character because it's an adjective, I guess you can do that, right? Because historical is more the adjective, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll try and give you another example. You were talking about the moon landing, which did happen, by the way. I've been coming in writing of the kids. Yes, it did happen. Although I think about like 30% or 40% of Americans don't believe it. But they would say to you, well, there's no historical evidence that the moon landing ever happened.
We're going to get loads of conspiracy theorists listening to my podcast now. Good example, though. Tell and say. I think tell and say, these are really key ones, aren't they? They are quite frequently, I would argue, mistaken.
They are. They are very common. I think we could do a whole podcast just on tell and say. With tell, you say who you're talking to, don't you? I told him, I told her, I told Bob that we were going to do something. And with say, you don't say who you're talking to. Please say what you mean. Who you're talking to. We don't know. Please tell Bob what you mean. Ah, he's telling Bob. You agree?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it because tell, I guess, is a bit more specific, isn't it? You're maybe talking about to one person, or it doesn't have to be one person, does it? It's giving one.
Tell the team to win the game. Yeah.
It's often seen in a kind of authority way as well, isn't it? Tell. So it's either specific or an authority, like the teacher tells you to be quiet.
I think so.
Whereas say, I guess, is a bit more general, isn't it? You don't say necessarily to somebody.
A very common mistake, I should say, again, with many speakers from translating or mistranslating, they'll say to. He said to me, which is grammatically correct. He said me is not grammatically correct, but he said to me is grammatically correct. But we don't normally say that. Bob told me he would be late, we would say. Bob said to me he would be late. That's what you often hear. Yeah, it is, but I encourage students to use tell more often. Generally, if you're talking about a direct comment from one person to another, you would use tell.
Definitely.
Some exceptions, but generally speaking.
That's true.
Having said that, with indirect speech, you always use say, don't you?
Yes.
Bob said, hello.
And I said, hello back, Bob.
Exactly.
Next one, rise and raise. I think also this is a commonly confused one as well.
So it's difficult to say because even native speakers will mix these up. if native speakers are doing it all the time, then you've got to admit defeat and say, well, it's okay. But I'll give you the official rules. Again, it's about transitive and intransitive, isn't it?
It
You
is, yeah.
raise something, you raise your hand, you raise a question, raise an issue. So it doesn't have to be a physical thing. We raised our glasses. That is a physical thing to celebrate her victory.
I always think about salaries. So you get a pay rise and your boss raises your salary.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit different in American English, isn't it? You get a raise. In British English, we say a pay rise, but American English, we got a raise as a noun.
Also think about the sun because the sun rises and
Exactly. It doesn't take a direct object. Something happens to the thing, so it rises. The dough rises in the oven. After, if you're following your prepositions, you're going to say rise, past tense is rose. So
Mhm,
the helicopter rose into the sky. Is
mhm.
that right? Doesn't sound right. I think it is right.
Yeah, it
It
sounds
is,
good.
yeah. Not a very elegant sentence, but it's correct.
I think the visual element worked though with the helicopter.
Raised is a regular verb.
Yeah, that's correct. I think this is quite hard actually for a lot of people to pronounce because it's really about pronunciation. The words are spelt very slightly differently. So you've got desert and you've got dessert.
I must admit, I sometimes hesitate with the spelling. I say, is it one S or two? I'm not a great speller. This one,
Mm.
sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I have to better check this. The desert, Sahara Desert, that's one S, isn't it? Tell me I'm right, John.
You are right. Yes, it
Okay.
is one S. That's correct.
I think Sahara Desert is actually wrong because Sahara means desert.
Ah, okay. It's the
I think
desert
so. I'm
desert.
not an Arabic speaker, so that means desert, desert. Like the river Avon. Avon means river.
Ah,
So river
so
Avon means river, river.
that's good to know.
The river, river, and the desert, desert. But I'm not an Arabic speaker, so maybe someone's going to let you know that I'm wrong about that. But that's what I heard. And dessert, your afters, your pudding, whatever you call it, John. What do you call it at school? Because I think it's quite regional in English. What do you call it at school when you have your dessert? Because no one called it a dessert at school, did you?
I don't think so. We probably call it, yeah, maybe afters. We're
It's for
using,
afters.
yeah, what's for afters? I'm pretty sure that we said afters.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes pudding. What's for pudding?
I don't
No,
remember saying
nobody said
that.
what's for dessert. Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. But no one said what's for dessert. You learn that after school or afterwards when you grow up. What's for
So that
dessert? But sort of getting invited to dinner parties.
seems a bit too posh, doesn't it, to say that as a child?
But
It's
strange because if you're at a dinner party and you said what's for afters or what's for pudding, they would look at you. Age thing, isn't it? Maybe it's changed now. They go, what? What's for afters? The reverse is true if you're a child. Dessert. Ooh.
I'm wondering what kids say nowadays. Maybe they say something completely different. I suppose it's about something that's easy to say, isn't it? Especially when you're very young. It's a lot easier to say afters, isn't it? And dessert. I suppose dessert is quite a hard word, isn't it, in a way?
It's not that hard.
It's
So.
not, but probably for kids it is. Because it's all about the stress, isn't it? Because if you have desert, like the Sahara Desert, the stress is all very much at the beginning, isn't it? And then dessert, the stress is very much at the end.
It's always stressful being a kid.
We've heard too many things from traumatized time as a child.
That wasn't one of them. What to call the end of a meal?
It wasn't like a chocolate pudding that you got stressed out by or
No, it
anything.
actually was traumatic. I tell a lie, not the words, because I don't know if anyone can relate to this listening, or you, John, but where I went to school, every dessert was the thing covered in custard. So it's cake covered in custard or some fruit covered in custard. And I hated custard. And to this day, I can't look at custard because it was just, and I don't think it was very good custard at the time. I think because it was very low quality thing. So they just covered it in custard because it was cheap to make. So the desserts were just like that. You don't have the same traumatic childhood school dinner memory.
I used to love it with custard. Maybe the quality of the custard at my school was just a bit better.
You went to a private school, so
Well, you're a different generation. I mean, hard times when you were growing up, right?
exactly.
Whereas
It's like Oliver Twist in my school. Please, sir, can I have some more?
my times, custard was abundant. It was everywhere. Interestingly enough, I used to work in the old Bird's custard factory
Oh, did you?
in Birmingham, yes, in my early
Oh,
20s.
really? Is that right?
So
Wow.
it was made into a workspace and bar area and social space.
So
And
you got free custard forever.
if only. No, they didn't give us free custard, unfortunately. It's still called the Custard Factory, though.
Oh, it's still called Custard Factory.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know
Yes,
that.
indeed. You should check it out.
Yeah, I should.
Let's move on. Got taken last. This is an interesting one. I guess, again, it depends on what kind of mother tongue you are. I suppose with this one, things take time, don't they? The bus journey takes 3 hours.
Something with a fixed beginning and ending, like a play or a film, you'd use last. The
Yeah.
time is set. But for journeys, I say that I'm kind of correcting myself here a little bit, but journeys you use take, don't you? Takes about an hour to get home from here.
It's probably quite a tricky one, that one, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah.
Because I guess last is maybe it's more about duration, isn't it? If you say something lasts something, some period of time.
hmm So something continuing for a specified period of time.
To take
You'd
time.
say, no, that'd be last.
Okay.
This podcast will last a week.
What does that mean?
Huh?
Why will the podcast last a week?
Well, it's a specified period of time. That's what I'm saying. To last as a verb. There are other uses of last.
Safe and secure. This is definitely a thing, isn't it?
This is definitely commonly misunderstood, confused, I should say.
It is, isn't it?
Safe means not dangerous, doesn't it?
It does.
I live in a very safe area.
Hmm.
There's no danger. We must put safety first, make sure nothing bad can happen. Is that right?
That's correct. And if you live in a dangerous area, so it's unsafe, then you need to secure your door with a few bolts because somebody might
Yeah,
break in.
exactly. So secure means to make things safe and not, I don't know, stealable or dangerous. So I think if you're doing a bungee jump, you must check that the clips,
The clips,
you know,
yeah, sure.
whatever you do, I don't
You've obviously been on numerous bungee jumps.
know. Exactly. But there is overlap because you say safety belts, but it is to secure you, isn't it? It's a safety belt your way.
Yeah,
So I think that's why they're confusing.
they are confusing in that respect, aren't they? Safe is about not being dangerous, and then secure is to ensure that you're safe, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Assist and attend.
Again, this is often confused, isn't it, for some speakers of some languages because of the false friends involved here. Assist just means to help, doesn't it? Can I assist you means can I help you? Going to assist John in his podcast to help out.
Exactly, because you've obviously got the noun that's used quite a lot, haven't you? Which is assistant. So my lovely assistant Gideon is helping me out with the podcast.
Yeah, with some assistance. To attend means to take part, to participate. So I had a lesson yesterday and 3 people attended.
That's three more than normal, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Audience and spectators.
I guess it's a good one. Yeah.
I like this one actually because I haven't really thought about this before. I guess a spectator is somebody who watches something, isn't it? Typically, you'd say spectators at a football match, wouldn't you?
I think big events, you say spectator, wouldn't you? A very big event,
Yes,
like
that's true.
for spectators at a football match, and at maybe a concert at Wembley Stadium. Talk about
Yes.
spectators. Maybe they're standing. I'm trying to think of the difference exactly. But the audience is people who watch, maybe a smaller group. The
Yeah.
audience in the theatre.
Yeah, we would always say audience in the theatre, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
In the stadium, it's always spectators, isn't it? It's curious.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't come out to Wembley Stadium and say, you've been a wonderful audience. No, you've been
No.
great spectators. It's very difficult to define, isn't it?
It is really, isn't it? Because if you had a concert in a stadium, what would you say?
I'd say spectator. If it's a small, intimate pub, that'd be the audience.
Okay.
Maybe in a closed,
At
something
least,
with a roof is probably an audience.
for me, though, I feel as if you were performing in some way as a musician or a comedian, you would always say audience, regardless of the size, right? Whereas a spectator would be about a match. It's kind of more watching, isn't it? Rather than looking at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe I have to check that out. I think we haven't done our homework properly, because I'm just wondering what you'd say at Wembley Stadium if you're playing a gig at Wembley Stadium. You've been a wonderful audience. Seems a little bit strange. Maybe you're right. But a football match is definitely big sporting events, huge events. At a rally, political rally, where thousands of people, you'd be spectators.
Curious one, that
So
one, isn't it?
but most of the time it's clear, isn't it? Most
Yeah.
of the time the theatre is going to be an audience. The
Yeah.
cinema is going to be the audience.
Definitely. I like this next one, childish or childlike. The reason why I quite like this one is I guess one of them is always negative, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the other one
Yeah.
can be used positively or negatively, depending on the context.
Oh, really? Okay. Because I thought childlike was quite positive and childish was negative. That's how I always explained it. But you could be right.
I guess with childlike, I suppose it depends what you're talking about. Because I mean, the example here they're talking about is childlike trust in other people. So I guess that's a sense of innocence, isn't it? But you could almost say that in a negative way, couldn't you? Because it's almost somebody being a bit naive.
He's done something wrong, but it's not negative as such, but the result is negative because he's too trusting. So I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. In other cases, you say he has a childlike imagination. That's great, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Don't be so
positive.
childish. Behave like an adult. Stop throwing your dessert on the floor and crying.
I have that vision of you in my mind doing that.
Childish is always negative, isn't it? Oh, that's so childish.
Childlike, as it could be.
Talk about the wonderful things of being a child that you lose when you grow up to be an adult.
Exactly.
But not in every case. And that's nice.
That's true. You have a childlike enjoyment of chocolate pudding.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good example.
With custard, you're very childish because you flick it on everybody because you don't like it.
Exactly. Your childish drawings, if you're an artist, those childish drawings, God, who wants to pay for that? Drawings are very sort of childlike and imaginative and sees the world as a child does. That's nice.
That's a good example of the contrast there. I think I like that one. It's good. I think we've come to the end of those more or less. So thank you for joining me, Gideon.
My pleasure.
And do you want to tell people about any of your latest videos or what you're up to at the moment?
Well, I'll just plug my YouTube channel, Let Them Talk TV. Check it out for grammar, vocabulary, and lots of stuff related to the history of the English language.
I know that many people love it, as do I.
Your good taste, John.
It's very kind of you to say so. Thanks for joining me, Gideon.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to English with Monty. Thanks for listening to English with Monty. For bonus episodes, sessions with the teacher, and discounts through our website, please sign up at patreon.com/English with Monty. Or you can join us for our English conversation group in London at meetup.com/Monty-English-conversation.